Thank you so much for being here today and joining us for our program of social work as a career. We have our friends from Fulton who are joining us by Zoom. And I just have a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to introduce our speakers so we can utilize our time. First thing I want to ask you is if you have a cell phone, please turn it off or on silent. Our friends in Fulton are muted so that we don't have a lot of feedback. Our session today is being recorded. We are recording it on Zoom, and Ms. Caldwell from Community Relations is recording this video. So by being here today, you are consenting to be recorded in this video that we will be placing in our intro to social work class for the future. So just want to make sure. No pressure, just so you know. I was afraid they wouldn't call if I told them.
Oh, we speak often, but the call is like,
we will live forever in the same office. We
also want to ask you, I've handed out some sheets of paper. We've asked all of our people who are attending today to please hold your questions until the end. That way, if we have students or faculty or people who need to slip out and leave, they can go ahead and do that. So if you would, please hold your questions until the end. We want to answer your questions and honor your questions, but if you would, please hold those for us. Okay, so it's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kim Sistrunk. Kim is the PACT program supervisor. She has been for 5 years. She'll explain to you what the PACT program is in a few moments. She has a master's of science in counseling, and Kim is a licensed therapist. And so she has 27 years total working in mental health, 25 of those with Department of Mental Health, State Department of Mental Health, and then a couple of those years she was with North Mississippi Medical Center. She has her husband David, and they have 2 children, Minor and Indiana. So we are honored to have Kim, Ms. Sistrunk here today, and in addition to Ms. Sistrunk, we have Ms. Keisha Williams. And Keisha is, her educational background, she is a licensed social worker, but she also has she's post-PhD program with a master's in addiction therapy. She has her bachelor's in social work from Rapid City, South Dakota. We've been sharing visits and fun about, Keisha is actually from South Dakota. She was just recently home visiting, so she has been at Life Corps since 2014, and the program, even though it's through Department of Mental Health, is technically under what's called Life Corps. They are here today to talk to you about social work as a career, and also the differences between, because very often we have a lot of students with a lot of confusion about the difference between being a therapist, being a counselor, and being a social worker. So they're going to sort of highlight some of those differences for you today and talk with you about both of those as a career and what options are out there in terms of settings that you can work in both of those different fields, but they are different fields. I will also mention that Kim is also in private practice. She actually has a private practice for therapy program in South Carolina. So she does see private clients as well. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Sistrunk and Ms. Williams.
thank you guys so much. We are really glad to be here, and we're excited that Dr. Panel asked us to come and be with you all today. And so the window of time is short, and there's a lot of information, so we're going to do our very best to cover the things that we need to cover and kind of condense those things down, because I can talk a whole lot and Keisha can talk a whole lot, but we are very good listeners. So, but we get kind of excited in the area of mental health and social work and psychology and therapy, and all of those fields that help to provide services to others in need. But as Dr. Panel mentioned, that we're going to talk a little bit about social work and the therapy aspects of a career path. And so, as myself being a therapist, and I supervise at the PACT program, and we have 2 social workers and we have 2 therapists, and I have worked in 3 hospital settings where we have had nurses, therapists, and social workers. And for me personally, they function very differently in what my personal experience has been. However, I do know that there are some things that kind of carry over. I mean, you're serving people, you're helping people, and that's certainly the nature of both of them. But sometimes in the direction in which they may go in helping someone may be different. It's more, in my thinking, in the experiences that I've had, is that social work can kind of be more of systems, where therapy is more of like individual. I mean, you may work with the families, but oftentimes it is that one-on-one or that couple, or maybe a parent and a child. And so, but in a much broader scope as far as social work is concerned. Definitely a need for both. My experience has been, and I looked up curriculums both with the University of Mississippi and Mississippi State for social work and for therapy. And so there is coursework that is different. There's a lot more of the coursework that is in counseling that is more directly geared to learning the skills to provide therapy. And so there's been a lot of changes in social work over the years where they have incorporated some of that. And I think that's a really good thing. Also, there has been a lot of legislative involvement that has allowed social workers the opportunity in like advanced practice social work to be able to provide different types of therapy. But in my experience, and I'm going to let Keisha expand a little bit on that, Ben, is that her bachelor's degree was in social work, and she has shared with me when we've talked about different situations with having social workers in our program and having therapists. And when we have interns, I'll give an example. We had an intern, and she ended up becoming employed in a different position, and she came to me when there was a position available for a therapist, and all the time that she was going through social work, she never said anything to me, never even knew. And when a position became open, she applied for the position, and I was kind of shocked, because when she came in to talk with me about it and let me know, I was like, well, I never knew that you were interested in doing therapy. And so we ended up in this conversation and dialogue about it, and she was like, yes, that's what I've always wanted to do. And I said, well, I thought you were doing social work. And she was like, well, it's the same thing. I mean, we do the same thing. I'm like, well, not really. I mean, kind of, sort of. It's hard to delineate some of that. So it's not just super cut and dry. There is a lot of overlap. But for me personally, I think social workers have in my hospital settings have been more involved in like aspects of family systems and linking to resources and connecting them to what their needs are, that they may not personally provide those, but they link them to other places and people that would. So I'm gonna let Keisha share a little bit with you about kind of her mindset of where she was when she started in social work and went a different direction in her career path.
Hello. How are y'all? Good. Well, Kim is right. I started off as a social worker. I even came to PACT using my social work degree when I first started. I was in my master's program when I started. And as a social worker, for me, I think it's 2 brains. You have a social worker brain, because I always wanted to be the answer to the problem. I wanted to be the resource that you needed. You came to me with a problem, I'm scouring all over to look for the answer. And when I started to take my master's in therapy, it almost felt like, you know, the Flintstones when he stops the car with his feet. That's how my brain did. Because I was like, wait, I can't be an answer. I have to literally just assist them through their own answer. Well, what if they got the answer? I do. And so it was my therapist brain that I had to develop. And with my curriculum, and my curriculum came from back home, they taught me theories and how to help them to investigate what the answer is in them. And that was different. I wasn't used to that because I've always been the resource girl. And that was something that the same intern, when she came to talk to me, she sat down and she said, what degree do you have? I said, I have a master's in therapy, and my PhD program is also in therapy and trauma. And she said, well, when do you use your social worker degree? Well, I kind of can't. I want to just tell them, it's not your fault, it's their fault. And you know, you want to just be but you have to guide them. And I told her the difference between the two, the social worker and the therapist, is that the therapists have to allow the client to find their own. And I remember she came back to me, she said, I can't do that. I just have to give them the answer. I cannot wait for them to figure it out. And I said, well, then you figured out what you want to do. You want to be a social worker. And she said, yeah. And she walked out of my office, kind of disgusted, but you know, it's the truth. And it wasn't that we was discouraging her in the conversation. I wanted her to be equipped, because when you're not equipped, you cause harm to the client. And I see that, we have seen that firsthand, that the client don't know which role you're playing, because as a social worker, you are true to your craft. And we want them to find the answer. But when we tell them the answer, we kind of disable them to think of their own. And that's the problem. When you take social work and bleed it into therapy, that brain never changed. And that's the key to being for being a great therapist, is learning how to switch that brain. Every now and then, this one tells me you in social worker mode, because even when the client ain't there, I'm scrambling and I'm looking and I'm searching and I'm resourcing. And she just shakes her head. She said, that's social worker. But it's still in me. But with the client, I have to allow them, or just walk with them or assist them in finding their answer. And that's the difference in what you would get in curriculum. And that's why it's so important to make a decision. Because when you try to mesh them, it's not that you don't want to help, it's not that you're great at what you do, but what would cause the client? What would happen to the client?
Yeah, it's trying to discern, you know, and I think she has said it very well based on what, you know, her experience has been. And in the beginning, and the newness of what that was for her, we've had many conversations, because she was doing a lot more of the social work and expending a lot of time and energy there, which was, I mean, is an asset really, but it's, you know, and the program that we have was very intense, and their needs are intense and great, all of the time. And so, that, you know, for me, when I used to work at State Hospital and I was on the women's unit, we had 25 clients there, all female. And I used to say, you know, they would like, Miss Kim, you know, just please tell me what to do. And I'm like, well, that's really not my job, you know, and that can be kind of confusing for people, because that's, kind of how some people have it in their mind. And I said, but I'm here to help guide you, I'm here to help facilitate, I'm here to ask questions that help you to derive at the place where you need to be. And that is, empowering you to learn how to make decisions and develop yourself to feel more comfortable, to feel more confident in being able to make decisions for yourself instead of someone else making decisions for you. Now granted, when there is intense crisis moments, you kind of do go into a different mode for a moment until you can kind of get the crisis managed or under control, and then you can kind of begin with that stuff. But for safety reasons and things like that, you may operate a little differently right at the beginning. But I have always said, I think people come much closer to doing the things that they want to do and making those choices if you're asking the questions that help to guide them there. They come much more closer to doing those things for themselves than if somebody's telling them. They might at first, but then the thing that I've shared there is the concern for somebody to come back and blame and fault you, like, this is what you told me to do and this is what happened. And it does happen, because I've had social workers that do that because they're such doer people. I mean, they're doers. And that's awesome for lots of what social workers do. But when you get into trying to tell people what to do and how to live their life, kind of, trying to do that from a therapeutic standpoint is a little different. And you do want to empower people. People have had a lot of trauma and things in their lives. I mean, they're used to people controlling them, telling them what to do, making decisions for them. And it does complicate things for their lives, and they don't feel comfortable to make those decisions. And so that is, to me, what a therapist's role is helping to empower that person. So there's different places, of course. I mentioned hospitals, but like nursing homes, assisted living, child or adult protective services for some of the social work employment. It often consists, as I shared, about linking resources and discharge planning and things like that. The educational pathways, and when you look at the curriculum, there are a few things that they're about 3 to 5, it depends on where the school is and what that curriculum is, that may have some emphasis in some therapeutic modalities. But this was the question of the intern that I asked, and I said, well, let me ask you a question. If you yourself or your son or daughter, which both of them had things going on, and I said, if you wanted to get them help, would you take them to someone who is a social worker, or are you going to take them to someone who is a therapist? Well, immediately she was like, well, I would take them to a therapist. And I said, because that's typically just in most people's minds, that is what you think of, because your whole entire program for therapy is in developing those skills and trying to remove yourself enough to where you are guiding them to make the best decisions for themselves. And so it's like I tell them, I don't go home with you, I don't live with you, I don't live with the people who are in your circle. So it's really hard, even though I'm listening to what you're telling me, I don't live there, so that's hard for me to do. But you live there, so I can ask those questions to help you figure out what is the best option for yourself. Let me see. So while, social workers do help people overcome challenges and connect those clients with services and resources that some others may be, like adoption agencies, some different nonprofits that may be out there. But basically, as far as both programs are concerned, and I know some of you are aware, but you do have to practice fully in either of those careers is to have your license and preparing for licensure. So, throughout either program, it's going to be very important to focus on what it is that you're learning in order to develop and know what these core competencies are that are required to pass the exam. And so, we want to stop.
So, a couple of things, Kim, if you guys would expand on. So what I think I'm hearing you say is sometimes, for example, I have a family that I'm working with right now, and they have been assigned a caseworker at the hospital. And she is a social worker, a licensed social worker, which means she has her master's degree in social work. She took the licensing exam at the state, but her role, as I understand, is really to kind of link that family with services that they might need, like home health or hospice. Is that correct? Can you
Yes, and so
expand on that?
yeah, so I'll share a little bit as far as PACT and our social workers. There are, also called case managers, so, I mean, they're one and the same. But they help those individuals with Medicaid process, to go out to the attorney, to start the disability process, getting their driver's license, helping them at the Social Security Administration if they don't have food, if they don't have housing.
Help with budgeting. Anything that would cause them, any need that they would need in a community, they would link resources. That's their job. Whatever is an individual basis, so every individual would need something different, and whatever their need is, their job is to link you to the resources.
So at PACT, we have a site nurse practitioner, we have 2 registered nurses, we have 2 social work case managers, we have 2 master's level therapists, we have an employment education specialist, and we have a peer support specialist. And all of those serve in such wonderful ways. And the model of PACT is a national model. It's been around for 40 plus years. It's in 7 different countries. It's in almost all 50 states. And it is a model that, even for as long as it's been around, it came to Mississippi in 2015. Mississippi started out with 5, and there are now 10. But I wish there was one in every county. PACT is a wraparound service to where, somebody would go make an appointment with a therapist. They might go to see a nurse for this or a nurse practitioner. They might go in through a different setting. They might see a social worker that's there. But all of this is under one umbrella in one building. And so you're able to provide more intensive services. So for example, if you made an appointment, say at our Midtown point over at the old mall, and you made an appointment to see a therapist over there, you go, and most of the time it's that you have 1 visit a month. If they needed to see a therapist 2 times a week for 2 months, at PACT they can do that. And so that is one of the beauties of, is that whatever level of intensity of services that someone needs, you are kind of meeting them where it is that they are at, and everyone's situation is different. It's not the same.
And what I was told when I went to PACT, because we are 30 days apart, is that these individuals should be in institutionalized settings. But because of PACT, we take the same individuals that should be institutionalized and work with them to make them independent living. And they took away the institutions from Mississippi.
And I'll throw in incarceration. So
yes,
the overarching goal of a PACT program is to prevent hospitalization or rehospitalization and or incarceration. So we do go see people in the jail. We provide therapy to them there, either going in to do that or by a Zoom type access.
So your program is, PACT program is really targeted toward people who maybe have mental health disorders or alcohol and...
Yeah, so severe and chronic, and so it's they really don't go in the DSM-5, but for reference point, the DSM as far as your Axis 1, like your schizophrenia, your bipolar, schizoaffective, major depression, your debilitating anxieties, PTSD, personality disorders. And so those definitely make things a little bit more complicated, but it is something that, we've had so many different, and then we have those who are duly diagnosed, who they might have a substance use disorder and a mental health disorder. We don't primarily, for criteria of the program, have people who are IDD. But prior to my coming, there were 2 individuals who were moderate, they're pretty high functioning. And they've lived one of them has lived independently, the other one still lives, with his parents. He's a,
And he's pretty severe.
and, but they've been a part of the program. I came September the 27th of 17, and so, but, she's very active. I mean, she's very involved, and she's very sharp, and
When she talks about IDD, she's talking about individuals with developmental disabilities. So this might be someone who has autism or that type of thing. So that's, a little
And she
different.
has children, so she's very active, she's very funny, but she
Yes.
requires a lot of attention. She requires a lot
she
of
knows.
attention. And she is a 24/7 type girl.
Yeah.
Because we are available to each client 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I was
So
messaged
these
all
phones
weekend.
is always busy.
Yeah.
So if you see me glancing, it's because I'm making sure nobody called me
Yeah,
that I'm in
it's all
crisis.
blown up.
So, just to sort of wind things up so we have time for some questions, just to summarize, if someone is interested in, you guys have done a great job of clarifying the difference between social work, psychology / therapy. So an individual who's interested in that is going to need to obtain a bachelor's degree. For most jobs today, it's a master's degree as well. And they're going, in both fields, social work and psychology, they're going to have to go and pass a state licensing
Yes,
exam,
yes.
Correct.
okay? So,
Yeah, you can get jobs with your bachelor's, but that
if you and Barbara.
that
between these
compensation
days-
is going to be minimal, and there are not very many of them.
Right.
Okay. Do we have questions? I know Savannah's writing one now. Anybody else have a question? Okay, Savannah, do you want to ask your question? And then I'm going to release the people from Fulton so they can.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I actually have two. I didn't think for anything. Okay, the first one is, do you work with like all ages, or is it a specific age, and can certain people specify into what age they want to like work with? Like, how does that work?
So we are 18 and above. Yeah. So anything below would be with CPS or some other community-based service.
And can I give her a reason why? I just thought about, we had a client, she started our program at 19, and it was so difficult because we are wraparound service, so we had to get her in housing also. And she couldn't get her utilities on. She couldn't, we had to really finagle that. And so sometimes we have to put our name on the line for our clients just to have housing. She didn't have nobody she could live with.
Well, and if they don't have a driver's license and they
Yeah.
don't have, those types of identification, I mean, you have to do all of that prior to, did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. And we have now unmuted the folks in Fulton.
I don't know if we should turn around or
Do we
stay
have any,
straight.
do we have any
Because-
questions from any of the students?
No, ma'am, they don't in here.
Okay. Ms. Griffey, do your people have any questions? They're quiet today.
Hopefully it's because the information was,
Because we were so
That's
thorough.
right, you guys are so
thorough.
So thorough.
well, we definitely tried to be.
Well, she had a second question.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of it could be considered more personal. So if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But
Okay.
most of the people I've talked to about therapy have this really bad mindset about it and think it's like a really bad thing, or it's for people who are crazy, etc., or they've had bad experiences. So what would you guys say to someone who's had a really bad experience with a therapist?
I have
not-
an example. I don't know if I want to say it.
Well, just like a lot of things, and it would be the same for social workers. I mean, to be honest, in any helping, I mean, all people are not created equal. And so when I refer out, like if I have someone that comes to me, there are 6 other therapists that are in where I practice, and they all are very different. You know, their background is very different, their lives are very different, their beliefs are very different. And people can get burned, from situations, and those are very, very unfortunate. And so I'm very careful personally with people that I work with. And I've had a lot of people come to me who have been burned. And so maybe encouraging them, to seek out, someone different, to give it another try. I mean, it'd be just like going into a job and, it not working out for various reasons, and you don't just not work, because you've had some difficulty or you've had a difficult boss. I mean, you just find somewhere else to work that's more suited for you. And I had a young person, he was 15 when he came to me from a prominent family, and he had been to 3 other therapists. And yes, it broke my heart, but I saw him for a year and a half, and it was very successful. And I just asked for him, to share with me, because I didn't know a lot. I said, tell me what has been your experience with, going to see someone. And I pretty much refer to it, whether it doesn't matter what the age is, if it's an adult, an older adult, is that I refer to it as someone's coming to visit me, and that we're going to talk through and process through things, because none of us are living life without anything. I mean, none of us. But I think you can kind of help to destigmatize, that something's wrong with you. I mean, people could really go just like you do for premarital, that you're going just to have growth, that you have things where maybe you're stuck, and, you're just trying to move forward. And you have people in your lives that have their own agendas and their own purposes for what they would like to see you do. And sometimes it just helps to have an outside person, to kind of bounce things off of and walk through those things.
Thank you for that. You talked a little bit about that. One challenge that I'd like to ask you to address is something that we bring up a lot in our classes. I know I do, and I think Dr. Hagan, Ms. Griffey probably bring this up a good deal, and that is the concept of comorbidity. And what we're seeing in terms of that with the people that we are working with and helping and that type of thing. So could you talk just for a minute about this concept of comorbidity?
You're referring to like the substance
I'm
of mental
talking
health
about, for example,
medical.
one of the things that I say to my students is, very often, over 90% of the people who are over at North State Hospital, which is our state mental hospital, over 90% of those people have comorbidity, meaning they have more than one process, more than one diagnosis happening at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And we do. We have an individual, I would say, job, because she has medical. She has some substance, but she kind of hides that a little bit, but it's not as severe as some of the others. But then she's also dealing with some memory loss. And so, but then yes, we have, we go by initials for everybody, so we're confidential. But we do have a lot, I would say 75% of our people, that there is a comorbidity, and they have diabetes and heart disease or COPD and substance. And so we do drug testing, and it's not as a punishment, it's to help them understand that if you're using substances, but you're also taking medications for for depression, psychotropic medications, that certainly complicates everything chemically, that what we're trying to help, establish and stabilize someone. It really defeats the purpose. And that just comes with educating, it's not to, judge them or beat them over the head or anything like that, because, a goal is definitely to be non-judgmental. You get much further, with an individual, they've been judged, and so when you can remove that and not have that sort of as a barrier to help, they're more inclined to seek help.
We have one client, ALH, who, when he came with his substance use, it's almost like he demonstrated a different diagnosis because of his substance use. Once that cleared up, when I tell you this young man is amazing, total different diagnosis received. We was able to treat him for what we needed to treat him. and he is flourishing. I mean, he is one of many that is doing exceptionally well. And if we can educate them on substance use, I like substance, that's kind of like
An
my
addiction
thing.
therapist.
So it's really nice to be able to just sit down and explain to them what's going on. And not judge them, but see how we can meet them where they at. And once you take care of the substance, then we can clearly see the mental health issue.
And even if we get a couple months down the road or a year down the road and they relapse, I mean, it's not like, oh my gosh. I mean, I can't believe, we just pick up right where we are and, and they're harder on themselves than we're ever going to be, most of the time.
And the point of that is that when you're working in social work or in therapy and psychology, you have to recognize that when you go into those fields, that very often you're working with more than one situation that's happening with that person. They might be homeless, but they might be homeless because they have a mental health disorder.
Yes.
Or they may have a mental health disorder and they're self-medicating. I mean, there's a
And we
lot of
see
different
that a
things
lot.
that come into play. And so that's one of the things that,
We see that.
yeah, that they see a lot, and that's one of the, as you just gave a great example, that's one of the challenges, but it's also one of the rewards, of being able to help people when you are in these professions.
He's returned to school and he's got
I
a
think
high GPA, 4.0
he
some
is
semesters.
actually like some Kuda Matata or something. Better than I was. I was like, oh, okay. And this is his senior year. So he's amazing. He makes us smile
Oh,
because we just figured that addiction part out and we regrouped his life. And he still knows how to balance his mental health and go to school and be his senior year, and he's got a high GPA. So he's amazing.
we have many amazing.
Many amazing ones.
It's easy to get focused on the ones that are not, so I have to reel it in for everybody. And I'm like, look at all of these wonderful success stories that we have. And helping them to define what success is for them. It's not the same for everybody. That's one of my favorite groups that I lead is about success.
Yeah.
Because not what society tells us, but what it is
And when
defined by you. But it can be hard for people to define that when their lives have been so complicated.
We had just one young lady, she got out of treatment Friday, and I haven't seen her since we went to treatment. And she just popped in with her grandbaby, and she looked amazing.
It's hard to fight the tears.
It was so difficult, and all she could do is thank you. And you just kind of suck it up, trying to be tough. And I said, "You're welcome." And just looked away because, she's going to do
She had
well.
30 years hanging over her head,
Yes.
28, 30 years hanging over
We
her
got
head.
her from drug court. We work with drug and mental health court. So she came from drug court. She had 30 years. And she just got to the place where she just didn't care. And she started using again. So she left.
Beautiful person.
Beautiful. And so it's just little victories like that that keeps you pushing.
Guys, thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We appreciate so much
We
your gift
enjoyed it.
of time and expertise in helping our students to better understand the difference in these two career paths.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank